Welcome to this series, The Foundational Questions of Our Time, brought to you by Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, specifically the Integral and Holistic Cosmology Synergy Circle and the Cornerstone Synergy Circle. These discussions feature global thought leaders dialoguing with renowned author Riane Eisler on how their transformational work relates to Dr. Eisler's Four Cornerstones of how we transform cultures from domination consciousness to partnership consciousness, crucial for these challenging times. I'm Dr. Kurt Johnson of Light on Light Publications and Media. Each video will engage Dr. Eisler in a discussion with a global thought leader introduced immediately after this initial introduction of Riane Eisler. Riane Eisler, JD, PhD, is a best-selling author, systems scientist, futurist, cultural historian, and attorney, whose work shows how to build a more equitable, sustainable, and less violent world. Her famous book, The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future, is now in 57 U.S. printings and 30 foreign editions. Dr. Eisler is president of the Center for Partnership Systems, CPS, and editor-in-chief of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies at the University of Minnesota. She is also the author of Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Structure Our Brains, Lives, and Future, co-authored with anthropologist Dr. Douglas Fry, Oxford University Press, 2019. And The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating a Caring Economics, hailed by Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu as the template for the better world that we are so urgently seeking. In short, according to dictionaries, a domination hierarchy is a social hierarchy arising when interaction of members of a social system creates a ranking system. Such rankings of who are favored can involve gender, race, economic status, and so on. Dr. Eisler's Four Cornerstones of how we shift from domination consciousness to partnership consciousness are these, and we invite you to hear our first video with Dr. Eisler in which she elaborates these four elements. The first cornerstone is childhood. The second cornerstone is the attitude toward gender. The third cornerstone is economics, and the fourth cornerstone is story and language. So let's go over now to introduce our guest for this episode. In this episode, we welcome Emmanuel Kuntzelman, the lead editor of the book, The Holomovement, Embracing Our Collective Purpose to Unite Humanity. As we continue to point toward the 2023 Igniting the Holomovement event and its foundational book, compiled and edited by Emmanuel Kuntzelman and Jill Robinson. Previously, in episodes 4 and 5, we welcome the Reverend Deborah Moldow, director of the Evolutionary Leaders, and Diane Marie Williams, co-founder of the Evolutionary Leaders and founder of its founding organization, the Source of Synergy Foundation. And they engaged with Dr. Eisler about the mission and purposes of the Evolutionary Leaders and those that are also inherent in Dr. Eisler's Four Cornerstones of how we can shift our world from systems of dominance to systems of partnership. We hope you'll enjoy those episodes, and you can find out much more about all of these activities at evolutionaryleaders.net and holomovement.org. That's HOLO movement.org. Emmanuel Kuntzelman will continue that important conversation about all of these focused activities for transformative change that appear to be going on all around the world and of which the emergent holomovement phenomenon is a part, and all occurring in the wider context of Dr. Eisler's Four Cornerstones for moving our world from domination to partnership consciousness. Riane's chapter in the Holomovement book is precisely entitled The Human Transition from Dominance to Partnership, the Four Cornerstones. So let me now introduce Emmanuel further before we open our discussion with them. Emmanuel Kuntzelman is an entrepreneur, writer, philosopher, philanthropist, and activist for social transformation. He began his adult life by traveling the world for a decades-long quest for his spiritual purpose before beginning his professional career as an editor and writer for Reader's Digest, where he authored dozens of articles for international editions. Upon discovering his livelihood in the realm of cultural exchange, he founded and managed a number of exchange organizations in Spain, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Having created the Greenheart International in 1985, he still serves as the chief advisor to that organization. And he is also the co-founder of Foundation for the Future in Madrid, Spain, where he has been its president since 1995. His work in spiritual movements includes being a founding co-creator of the Global Purpose Movement and Purpose Earth, as well as his collaborations as a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. Emmanuel is a board member or an advisor to Greenheart, Humanities Team, Unity Earth, Integral Transformative Practice International, and the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research. He is the co-editor of the anthology Purpose Rising 2017 and has contributed articles to a wide variety of publications around the world, culminating, of course, in his being the co-editor of the Holomovement, Embracing Our Collective Purpose to Unite Humanity, a March 23 release from our Light on Light press. His vision for the Holomovement is a project that he's been working toward for over 50 years. So welcome to Emmanuel and Riane, and I'm actually going to stay on to ask some questions to both of them on which we can base our discussions. So let's go over to that. So let's start with a question to Riane. So Riane, based on the breadth of Emmanuel's work, in this vision of the emerging Holomovement and in the Holomovement book, which Emmanuel co-edited and to which you've contributed, is the vision of physicist David Bohm, of an underlying implicate order whose nature, which is in fact profound interconnection and thus profound partnership, that should actually unfold and emerge as the explicate order all around us, actually the way that things should be, if this profound interconnectedness and partnership could be lived out by all of us in real time. So Riane, given your studies of how earlier there were far more egalitarian and partnership-based cultures that actually flourished on our planet, but then they were replaced in the last 5,000 to 10,000 years by domination-based systems. So how do you see the significance now of this emerging global Holomovement that actually aims to restore and regenerate those ideals of Bohm in the world and in all of us, that some refer to in these times as the Great U-turn, back to partnership consciousness and back to partnership cultures? So the question then is, what appears to be happening to you then, Riane, in the context of your work as you see this emerging Holomovement?
Well, there are so many commonalities between my work, my research, my findings, and not only the Holomovement, but the whole idea of interconnection. To begin with, unlike most of our scientific research, which really is not inclusive. I mean, if you think about it, it marginalizes or ignores really no less than the majority of humanity, women and children. Not only that, it's very fragmented. It really doesn't look at interconnections, because how could it, when all of these little, here you study biology, and here you study neuroscience, and here you study sociology, and here you study political science, rather than multidisciplinary. And of course, that is a trend. And my research, the study of relational dynamics, was really a pioneering attempt to do this, to really draw from a whole systems database that includes the whole of humanity, that includes the whole of our lives, including where we all live, which is also marginalized, in our intimate family and other relations, which neuroscience shows are foundational. And of course, the whole of our history, really re-examining the view that we have all been taught that, well, you know, the caveman cartoon, right? You know, in one hand, he holds a club, a weapon, and with the other hand, he's dragging a woman by the hair, right? So what does it say? It says that a domination system, top-down rankings, injustice, male dominance, but that's how it's always been. And by implication, that's how it always will be. Well, the research, the archaeological findings, even DNA studies completely disprove this. But, you know, it takes forever to have the academy really embrace a new perspective, a new worldview. And frankly, the old worldview is one of the stories, one of the false stories that we're all taught that help to maintain and perpetuate what I call domination systems. So that is one way. Of course, the four cornerstones that you mentioned are all interconnected. You know, I mean, childhood, well, that's the first cornerstone, gender. And these two cornerstones are really not visible in our conventional education, in our conventional studies of society, in our conventional social categories, like right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern. A colleague of mine calls them weapons of mass distraction, because they really fragment our consciousness. They're not looking at the whole of the society. Economics, and I mean by economics, I'm certainly not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We need markets. We need enlightened government policies, but we have had economic systems that degrade and externalize, really, because this is perpetuated by GDP, nothing less than the three life-sustaining sectors of the economy: the natural economy, the volunteer community economy, and the household economy. And you know, I can talk about economics forever. I mean, we're not only dealing with antiquated operating systems in economics, antiquated metrics. I mean, capitalism came out of the 1700s, socialism came out of the 1800s. We're now in the 21st century post-industrial era, but they have perpetuated what I call a hidden system of gendered values, where anything stereotypically in domination systems coded feminine, like caring, caregiving, nonviolence, is marginalized, is considered inferior to what in domination systems, and this is really nothing to do with anything inherent in women or men, is considered real masculinity. So there's always money for prisons, right? Well, punitive, the male head of household, wait till your father gets home, or for weapons, for wars, the hero, as warrior. But somehow there isn't enough money for what is coded feminine, soft, caring for children, nurturing children, feeding children, and caring for our natural life support systems, Mother Earth. So we have to look at the foundations, and that takes me to the fourth cornerstone, which is, of course, story and language. And I want to, before I close, very quickly get back to childhood, because, look, nothing less than neuroscience today absolutely shows that this whole argument between nature and nurture is, again, a distraction, a red herring. What really matters is gene expression. And we know today from neuroscience that even if there is a predisposition to certain kinds of behaviors genetically, whether or not that predisposition is expressed or inhibited largely depends on the interaction. And this really, the focus is very much on the first 5 years, but it goes on all through life, really. The interaction of genes with our environment, which, of course, for humans is mainly cultural, right? And we've had these categories, these studies that really fragment our consciousness, and that have not been a whole systems approach. So these are just some of the surface immediate commonalities. And I think that the Holomovement, whole systems, we're talking about something that actually interconnection is something that physics is now showing. Actually, is part of our universe. So I think that we must pay attention to these four cornerstones because they are foundational. It is on these that regression after regression to strongman rule, to violence, to in-group versus out-group thinking and action has been based, whether it was Hitler in Nazi Germany, Khomeini in Iran, the Taliban, Stalin in the former Soviet Union, or Putin in Russia, for that matter, and I'll close with this, you said we should go on for a long time, and I'm really doing that.
Doing well.
But I just want to close with Putin because, in 2018, Putin substantially lowered the penalty for family violence. In other words, so if in Russia now you hurt or you kill a member of the family, a child, a woman, a man, the penalty is less than if you hurt or kill a stranger. Now, why? Because Putin and the people like the Rightist Fundamentalist Alliance and their social issues, they recognize the connection between their so-called social issues and between the kind of family. And yes, between an authoritarian, rigidly male-dominated, punitive, violent family as foundational to a state that has the same characteristics: authoritarian, strongman rule, punitive, rigidly male-dominated, violent. And it's really time that we, who are trying to create a better world, a world that is actually, as the research for my latest book, For Nurturing Our Humanity, which came out with Oxford University Press in 2019, shows, this is really, strangely enough, part of, quote, human nature, but you'd never know it from normative stories like Original Sin or Selfish Genes, would you?
Yeah, Riane, thank you so much. That has built a really strong foundation for this discussion. And I want to give Emmanuel now a chance to respond to that because, in the nature of his own understanding of the alignment between this vision of the transformation from dominant systems to partnership systems, and particularly in his own understanding of your work, the Four Cornerstones, which you just laid out, the stories that a culture tells, how its children are raised, its attitude toward gender, how that's all reflected in economics and then all aspects of life. Whereas today we see so much inequity, challenge, conflict, and even war. And you may not know, Riane, that Purpose Earth, which is one of Emmanuel's major foundations, its major work is with grassroots projects all around the world, right at the grassroots level of human need in small communities where disadvantage and inequity has been a historical problem. So I know that's certainly where Emmanuel's heart is. So Emmanuel, then how do you see this alignment between the emerging partnership consciousness and the emerging Holomovement?
Thank you, Kurt. It's a pleasure to be here. Riane, pleasure to be here in conversation with you. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share in this forum, which is, of course, extremely important and very timely. And yes, all of Riane's work and the breadth and scope and history of it really underpins and supports the entire concept of the Holomovement. So as far as agreement goes, I think we're in total sync there. It really is a turning point in human history. From my point of view, such as there's never been anything close to this that we're living in right now. Yes, there have been changes and renaissances and industrial ages, but this crisis, this meta crisis that we face right now is the singular moment in human history as we know it. And all of us being here and now, we're part of this divine mission, really, to solve the many problems that we face. And I think they can be summed up in that we have to be in a transition from dominance to partnership. The dominance syndrome for most of the course of human history has been a result of the material development and therefore spiritual decline of human consciousness. We've just been duped and overtaken by our impressions that we are all separate, that reality is fragmented, and that we're all in some kind of intense competition for survival with our fellow human beings, which obviously is a very bad story. It's untrue, and it's not the way we really are. But it comes as a result of a long 10,000 year period of dominance, and particularly male dominance, and in the colonial age, white male European dominance. So let's tell it like it is. That's the way it's been, and it's jaded people. We've become accustomed to probably our biggest fear throughout history has been our fellow human beings. No matter what side of the spectrum we were on, or of religious disputes, or territorial disputes, or race disputes, and all the rest, it's been a long history of warfare, and dominance has had to rise above the conflict to dominate. And it's a very unfortunate situation that has brought us to this crisis in our so-called civilization. So we have to make a momentous turn. This is equivalent to the three great happenings in all of evolution of the universe, which is the beginning, the Big Bang, we call it the Big Breath, the appearance of human life, the appearance of self-reflective human consciousness. Those are the first three great miracles. And now we're in this turning point where we need nothing short of a fourth great miracle. And that miracle will be the move into partnership consciousness. When the first single-celled organisms on the planet were suffering from an excess of oxygen, and there was a crisis problem then. They didn't gate themselves off and try to become supercells. They networked and brought themselves together. And that has turned out to be, in all of biological evolution, the most powerful driving component for growth and development. And we as human beings, we're smart enough to know this. Whether or not we can implement it, well, that's what we're working on right now. But it's all about partnership, collaboration, reaching out to our fellow humans, accepting everyone as equal, and really, above all, as we face, yes, the gender problem and the childhood problem, as you so well state, Riane, the majority of the human race is being left out of the big picture here, or being disadvantaged. Talk about use of resources. That's the worst use of resources we could have ever thought of, to have over half of the population being limited or marginalized. Why would we do that?
It's a way of maintaining domination systems.
Yeah, it is. But I think the time has come for a change. So, accepting that, educating our children from an early age as part of these cornerstones, absolutely fundamental in making this change. And it really does come down to a new story of unity consciousness, of partnership, of collaboration, compassion, working together, getting back to the true divine spirit of the human soul, which was really altruistic and sharing and loving by nature. Now, we've had a rough history. We're not going to sit here and bemoan all that's happened in the past, but we need to look forward into this partnership coalition that's arising so many places and simultaneously all over the globe right now as a kind of immune response to the entire situation. In many ways, we're a sick species, and we need to heal ourselves. And it's time to stop dominating, start cooperating, find the compassion in our hearts, and seek out partnerships. So the cornerstones and the whole conceptual framework of Riane's work throughout her life really point to the need of making this great turn and creating the fourth greatest miracle of all time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the other thing that you both have in common, which is where I want to go next, is that your whole life, particularly in the last few decades, has been about bringing tools to this transition and to this miracle. So I want Riane to comment particularly about the things that they have developed at the Center for Partnership Systems, and particularly the Partnership Technology Toolkit, an essential resource for a better future that they developed with a grant from the Ford Foundation. And also to let everyone know that at the end of this video, you'll see a page where all of these free resources are listed, and you can stop the video, and there's a link there for each of these things that she'll mention. And then I'm going to pass the baton from the things that Riane's been doing in the world of creating tools to then what Emmanuel's been doing. Because think about it, the Holomovement event and the Holomovement book are also a part of these tools that are emerging now. And this effort that's being made to network all of the groups that are emerging with a similar vision so that we get that traction at a global level through civil society. So Riane, tell us about all the tools that you've developed.
Well, I'd be very happy to do that. I first want to say something about working together. It really depends on for what goal. Because cartels work together, terrorists work together, gangs work together. There is cooperation in domination systems, although it's much harder to really cooperate across nations. There's a whole, us against them, in-group versus out-group mentality, starting with the in-group of mankind, and the female other is baked into the system. But we're talking really about a miracle, a turning point, as you said, Emmanuel, and a brand new, but really very old worldview. And this is very difficult to quantify. But we must find some way of bringing it about, because what's happening now is that the people pushing us back, they have a very coordinated political, economic, family agenda, right? And we're all over the place. You know, the ones of, when I say we, I'm talking about people like you and I. I mean, I'm a child Holocaust refugee. So very early in my life, I started to ask questions about, does it have to be this way? And of course, my research many years later shows there is an alternative, but we can't see it. We simply cannot see it because of all, well, mainly these four cornerstones. So the tools that we've developed, because I am going to get to that, Kurt. First of all, we have an online course called Changing Our Story, Changing Our Lives. And I would really love to have it be more accessible, more popularized through the entire aspect of this Holomovement. And the people who understand that we're talking really about consciousness, a consciousness of a partnership alternative, of the configuration. We have tremendous graphics, by the way, which I consider tools too, on our website, which is centerforpartnership.org. But the course has 4 videos. One is where we are. The next one is how did we get here? Because the story we've been told, as I said, about our long, deep past is wrong. It is false. And it is still being perpetuated. Then a third video, and they all have a lot of visuals, is, of course, prefigures in some ways my book, Nurturing Our Humanity, because it really looks at neuroscience. I mean, who are we humans? And when you said, Emmanuel, that's our true nature, is to share and to care. Do you know that neuroscience shows that the so-called pleasure centers of our brains light up more when we share and care than when we win and dominate?
Exactly.
But if you grow up in a culture where the only 2 alternatives, like Trump said, it's all about domination, right? I mean, he said that. He doesn't see, for him, the only alternatives are you either dominate or you're dominated. There is no partnership alternative. There, you either, well, as you said, you compete for so-called scarce resources. And that takes me actually to the second resource. And it's woven in through all of our work. Domination systems create artificial scarcities through not only misdistribution of resources, but destruction of resources. Look what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, it's barbaric, not only life, but, infrastructure is being gratuitously described because some guy wants more territory. It's a guy on top in Russia. I mean, it absolutely makes no sense. So a partnership technology toolkit is really a consciousness raising. It has 9 questions. It is somewhat, 4 of them deal with the 4 cornerstones, but then we also have one on diversity, which is simply not enough. If you have a diverse person, but all they want is a bigger slice of the existing pie, you're going to get somebody else on top, right? So that's you really have to have a consciousness there. And then, of course, and the environment and racism are also part of it. But they're questions to assess where is your consciousness, but also they all have information about the real situation that we're in. And I think it can be adopted for any purpose. I mean, we did it as a technology toolkit because that's what our grant was actually to convene people, but we decided that, I mean, all of these meetings are lovely, but we wanted to build a tool, something that can be used. We also have many resources on parenting, on authoritative rather than authoritarian, nonviolent rather than violent parenting, the caring and connected parenting guide, and it's available for free on our website in both English and Spanish, by the way, because you're living in Madrid, so maybe you can use it there. And we have articles. We have a journal that is published at the University of Minnesota. It's an online, it's the journal, Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies. And there's a wonderful article there called Taking Partnership Home, and it's on reconstructing, transforming families. And I highly recommend it, and Kurt has the URL for it. So, but it is not easy to get funding for changing consciousness. And we have a brand new CEO working, because I'm ancient, as you probably can glean, which I still have a lot of energy, but I need somebody to work with me as long as I can, and then to take over. And she is amazing, Eli Ingraham. So, and I'm putting this out through this video. We need funding at the Center for Partnership Systems, because if we don't mainstream these resources, and that takes a lot of funding, frankly, we cannot use them to really accelerate this holomovement shift from domination to partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. We are competing for the attention of everybody, and particularly younger people who are so involved in growing up and everything that's right in front of them because of that. And it's how do we steer the attention toward these positive things? I was really gratified last night that I discovered that someone overseas has discovered Light on Light's books and magazines and set up a blog about them. And I read 2 months of the blog, and all of the comments were super positive and super altruistic about change. There was nobody yet dumping negativity or dumping, nasty words like happens in public blogs a lot. That might happen down the line because they opened a public blog. But a lot of these people were young, and they were just saying yes to all these values that you're all speaking of. And that's why I wanted to then talk about a lot of the tools that Emmanuel is going to be bringing forth in the Holomovement. I'm actually even mentioning that the Holomovement book itself, a lot of people, if you look at who's in this book, Jude Currivan, Dwayne Elgin, Irvin Laszlo, Lynn Twist, Ken Wilber, David Corton, Elizabeth Sartoris, Thomas LeGrand, J.J. Hertog, Riane Eisler. It just goes on and on. Like a lot of people say, oh my God, that's my bookshelf. Well, that's one of the tools that's emerging about this story, this new story that we're trying to tell, which actually is an old story. And it's interesting, recently on David Sloan Wilson's work with Pro-Social World, they were emphasizing this new archaeological research that shows it wasn't always this way, and that domination hierarchies are more recent. So, Emmanuel, with everything that you're cooking up and visioning, tell us what you think the tools can be, the ones you want to bring forward, and how you see that partnership emerging.
Thank you, Kurt. Well, first of all, I think the toolkit that you're developing or have developed, Riane, sounds very intriguing, and we'll certainly take a long look at that and see how we can incorporate all these valuable assets for change making that you've already developed. So hopefully we can talk more about that and find a way to implement them on a grander scale. because it certainly takes tools and it takes action. So the time is kind of drawn short here on philosophical discussions, and it's really time to act and find some tools and find some practical applications. And Riane mentioned consciousness and consciousness raising and how it's difficult to get funding for that. It's probably the most important need we have right now. Quite honestly, I think we need a new species of human being. We're not going to probably change our looks, or maybe even not our biological framework. I think we've got the capacity within our consciousness, within the spirit that we're sourced with here, to really get back to that source and to our roots of compassion, understanding, and partnerships within ourselves. If we just calm down and stop being deluded by all the mass distractions out there. So we can do it. But to raise consciousness, yeah, it's misunderstood, it's underdeveloped, and it's not funded. So part of our program will be to raise the public interest in this. We want to encourage people to take action in small, large scale, any way they can throughout the world. Building small groups of what may be called holons of action, but above all action, picking a project, doing something about something. And this is all tied in with Bohm's theory of quantum physics and also an application to sociology. And I really feel that the Holomovement gives people a new vision of reality because it explains the science, how we got here. It's an ontological wave. There was some source, there was some meaning, and there is some purpose in evolution. It's not a random billiard ball contest. There's divine ordinance in what's happening here. And that is our consciousness at work, and it is elevating, but we need to accelerate that. And the underlying physics formula for the infinite quantum potential that Bohm spoke about is E equals HF. Okay, E is our energy, and HF, F is frequency. That's our consciousness. The frequency of our coherence, our resonance, our thought patterns. And we can increase that, and we can do that consciously. So that's at our fingertips to increase the frequency. And then the only other factor is H. And this little h is Planck's constant, but it is the input of individual actions. A quantum is a whole individual action, no matter how small, that makes the universe run. That is the input from the divine source, Planck's constant, and it represents action. So if we don't take action, nothing happens. The more often we take action, it multiplies the increasing frequency, hopefully, of our consciousness, and it equates into a much higher energy level. So this is the formulaic understanding of putting this in, but without action, without tools, without actually implementing it and making it happen, it's all kind of lost in words. So I'm so pleased to hear about the partnership technologies. These are the kinds of things we need to implement, and the Holomovement intends to make these tools at our disposal accessible and understood by growing groups of people working together with this new sense, not only of physics, but of spirituality, and both together, giving us modern 21st century understandings of where we came from, why it's happening, and what we need to do about it, and giving ourselves the tools and the inspiration to act and get it done. So I think it all works together, and very excited about looking forward to collaborating more with your partnership systems technologies, Riane.
Well, thank you so much. I should mention that Kurt and I and some others have been also trying to develop another tool. 80 to 90% of the people on this earth identify to some extent with a religion. And yet in the scriptures, what you have is the grain mixed with the chaff. You have at the core of all spiritual teachings, you have partnership teachings, so-called feminine teachings of caring, of compassion, of love, do unto others, mutuality, partnership. But then you have horrible, horrible teachings. You know, I mean, stoning people, women, children, raising cities, killing everybody. And we are trying to work on a project to really bring together spiritual religious leaders, enlightened ones from all the world religions, to really use the lens of the partnership domination social scale to really re-examine this, because these the terrible chaff is being used against us so effectively, so consistently, and we have to, and just saying, oh, you're wrong, that isn't it. I mean, you tell people they're wrong, they get defensive. You have to show them how, in the course of domination history, these chaff teachings were glommed on. And I think that that's a terribly important project that in my book, The Power of Partnership, we also have a new podcast now called The Power of Partnership, of people interviewing people like Rafi or like Helen Hunt and Harville Hendricks, etc., who've been really influenced by this work. Which again, is a way of raising consciousness. But I just wanted to bring that project up because you can't just ignore the spiritual side of human beings. And the fact that religion has become in so many ways a domination, rigidly male-dominated, a top-down structure is really not religion. It's domination religion.
Yeah, and if you want to follow on that, episodes 2 and 3 of this series, which were done during World Interfaith Harmony Week in early February. One was done with Ben Bowler from Unity Earth, who is a partner of Emmanuel's Purpose Earth, in the context of exactly the mission of the world's religions for their core message and not for what's evolved into their dominance structures. And then Doug King from Conversation for a New Earth is one of the largest progressive Christian organizations in the world that's also talking about changing this story and understanding some of that chaff that's there from these 1,000-year-old cultures or from medieval times, which needs to get understood as not the way we want to behave in any religious context. So people know where to find this series. Just look for episodes 2 and 3. Following on this as well, and where I want to actually ask for some follow-up by you all, is I was talking earlier today to Claudia Wells, who is the chair at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And what she pointed out to me was that it's highly likely that we are not the only planet in the universe that's going through this kind of a transition that came from multiple racial roots, multiple cultural roots, multiple language roots, histories of war and conflict, that now, because of population and resources, reaching this place where it either becomes a successful global cosmopolitan civilization that's a partnership civilization, or it goes extinct. And what she said is that if I ever met an ET from a planet like that had made it, those are one of the two questions I'd ask them. I'd ask them two questions. The first question would be, how did you get past that threshold, which is exactly the one you're talking about now, as you vision, partnership consciousness, or you vision the emerging Holomovement. And also, she said the second question would be, how did you learn to handle your technology? Because that's the other area where we could get outpaced by our ethics, would be outpaced by our powers in technology. So one thing I wanted to do to kind of begin to close out here, another 10 minutes or so, I wanted to really kind of ask each of you to kind of, since you've gotten to know each other now, we know a lot about your work and we've steered people toward where to find out more about each of your work. If you were giving a global diagnosis and then we're giving a global prescription in the sense of what is it that's really wrong and what is it that's really needed to solve that, how would each of you really write that diagnosis and write that prescription? So take your time on that because it's a big question. But I thought I'd start with Riane on that if you're ready to go.
Well, I'll start with the Four Cornerstones. Because, if you look at modern history, what you see is that every progressive social movement has actually challenged the same thing, a tradition of domination. Whether it was the Enlightenment, so-called right, the divinely ordained right of kings to rule their subjects, or whether it was the abolitionists and then the civil rights, the anti-colonial, Black Lives Matter movement challenging the so-called divinely ordained right of a quote superior race to rule over an inferior one, the women's movement, feminism, and now a global movement challenging again the so-called divinely ordained right of men to rule over the women and children in the quote castles, military image of their homes, all the way to the environmental movement challenging again our once hallowed conquest and domination of nature, which, as we are discussing, could, at our level of technological development, guided by domination values and an ethos of domination, could take us to an evolutionary dead end. But they have, if you really look at them, because of what I said at the beginning, they have naturally not paid sufficient attention at all to these four cornerstones: childhood. And I spoke about Putin and the fact that these regressions, they all recognize the importance of what children observe and experience, especially in the first 5 years of their lives, not only in forming their architecture of their brains, but with that, how we think, how we feel, how we act, including how we vote. Just voting is not democracy, as we saw, as we keep seeing worldwide. You have to have a certain consciousness. So I think that we must pay attention to really shifting the education of people. 80 or to 90% of people, if they're asked, still say that, spanking, that's fine. Even though even the American Psychological Association has said, hey, it's not only ineffective as a means of disciplining, but it is harmful psychologically as well as physically. Gender. I cannot emphasize this enough. Gender, like childhood, is not just a women's or children's issue. It is a key social organizing principle. We have a hidden system of gendered values. And it doesn't, for us to say, be nice, be good, be caring, that's lovely, but we have to excavate what stands in the way, and it's our socialization. And if we don't have that understanding, then we unconsciously perpetuate it. And what we're talking about is building I wrote a whole book about this, The Real Wealth of Nations. And the subtitle is Creating a Caring Economics. And as I said, it does not throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. It recognizes that we need markets. We don't happen to have a free one, of course, and that we need enlightened government policies, but we need an economic system that gives visibility and value and rewards to the most essential human work, caring for people starting at birth and caring for our natural life support systems, which neither capitalism nor socialism nor GDP are set up for us to do. So we need funding to develop what I called a social wealth index, or for in some way, in 2014, we launched the first iteration of the social wealth economic indicators, which show the connection between a low investment in families, in teaching parenting. That the most effective intervention really for so-called at-risk children is helping parents, helping single mothers, helping families to learn and to have the time and the space to really parent in a partnership way. I mean,
yeah. Wow.
I'll just
go ahead.
very quickly go on. I mean, we need that economics, and we also need different stories, different language. And this, we're talking about a really international media, lots of media campaigns, because people are so bombarded by social media now that their consciousness is really fragmented, even worse in some ways. And yet young people are so yearning for a unified movement. They are very excited about being in the environmental movement. But as I said, when I was invited to speak to the UN General Assembly on a session on harmony with nature, you cannot just tack on harmony with nature to a fundamentally imbalanced economic and social and family operating system. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like you were both saying, that this challenge is a transition that borders between a challenge and that need for the miraculous. But that's what adaptation is all about. And it would seem that we certainly have something happening globally that's moving us that direction. So Emmanuel, so it's your turn. That was quite a diagnosis and prescription, Riane. So I'm interested to hear Emmanuel's as well, in the sense of how you would write the diagnosis and then give the prescription, because you're already involved in giving the prescription with the Holomovement.
Well, indeed, Kurt, it's a big question, isn't it? And one that needs quite a bit of attention. I mean, to be quite honest, my diagnosis is rather dire if we look at the situation in just purely practical terms. Let's be honest, we've got 8 billion human beings on the planet. And when we think of all the time and the agriculture and the pollution and everything that goes into just feeding everybody on a daily basis, and the fossil fuels it consumes, and we've got a lot of negative feedback loops from all of this, it doesn't look good. Okay. But I've always been an optimist, and I have faith in humanity, and I think we can overcome this rather grave diagnosis. And I've always tried to concentrate more on what we can do going forward. What we have is what we have. It's a bit of a mess, but we can get out of it. And so, I gain strength to overcome the sort of negativity of my diagnosis by looking for more prescriptions and more solutions to the situation going forward. I think, one thing Riane said in previous conversations here, and it is that I really like, is it's not about dismantling the top. It's about building the foundation up from the grassroots. And that is really the answer. We can't threaten the top or anything like that. They're going to hold on for dear life. I think we just need to focus on the grassroots level, basic services, helping people, using the power of consciousness that's been so denied to women and children and so many others worldwide, and really focus on that base, strengthen it, and show the power of cooperation and partnership from the grassroots base upwards. And this will begin to resolve what is our crisis of consciousness, this kind of jaded cynicism that's just penetrated the human mind world over. And right now, people don't believe in cooperations or partnerships on the whole because they think they're going to get burned, because they think they've heard the story of dominance. And if I open up to being a volunteer partner in cooperation, I'm just going to get hoodwinked and burned by the system. So we have to change the mentality of the system from the bottom up and re-socialize and help our cultures and our society from childhood onward really understand that and move it forward. So this will take place, by small groups of action intertwining into movements, the movements combining into one grand movement. I propose giving it an overall name just so we have some identity of what we are doing, who we're working with. It's enormous. It will eventually be most of the planet. I firmly believe that, because working together in partnership is a great idea whose time has come, and there's nothing more powerful than that. So it will happen. It's just about creating a unified field of trust. We need to regain the trust of human consciousness in everything we do. And once that begins to happen, people will see it and they'll say, okay, I'll help. I'll volunteer. I'll dedicate my life to a higher purpose because I trust in the good of humanity and that I won't get burned, that I will all come out ahead together, working together for a brighter future. We can do it. We were made to do it. Our hearts and minds and consciousness is ready to take that leap. We will do it. It's going to take a little work and some understanding, but it's on the way and it's unfolding before our eyes.
Well, I think that's something we all needed to hear. And I saw that Riane was smiling. So Riane, be welcome to respond to that, because I know one thing that Claudia Wells said to me today. She says, even if you read cosmologies, there's people who say, well, the Earth can evolve and can make that higher leap. There's other cosmologies you read that say, no, we're just a laboratory that's meant to be chaos upon chaos so that we have that experience. I don't think so. I opt for the one that brought the big smile to both of you. There's that famous quote from Paul Hawken. It reflects what Emmanuel said. If you still have hope for the world, you haven't seen the data. But if you don't have hope for the world, you don't have a heart. So that's where we're in that interplay.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that was making you smile, Riane. So please say something to each other here now. We've gotten a chance to know each other, appreciate each other's work, and have a chance to just say something to each other before we go on to close.
Well, we at the Center for Partnership Systems are about to really expand our reach. And I hope that we can contribute to creating just what you're talking about, a global partnership movement, because we can be so much more effective if we all realize, the people who are working in the field of domestic violence, of trauma, they don't see the connection with the environmental movement, but it's there. Because if you really look at, I've got an encyclopedia article on that. The common denominator in domestic violence is domination, control. And male socialization to identify with that. So I think we are on the cusp of something. And I am excited by this conversation. I'm excited by what Kurt is so deeply involved with this, and really, and Emmanuel, it's just a pleasure to know all the good things that you are doing. I feel like I would like to invite you perhaps to be part of our advisory council at the center, if that is something you're interested in, and you don't have to answer now. Kurt certainly is, and I would love to have you because we're through the Ford Foundation, we are working with an organization called Spitfire to develop a new strategic plan and to really, really get this show on the road, this consciousness change that we're all in the business and our hearts are in. And I love the Hawkins quote, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Emmanuel, what would you like to say to close out?
Yeah, well, we are going to get the show on the road, and it's been a great pleasure being on this show here tonight and sharing time and space with you, Riane, and thank you, Kurt, for coordinating everything. It's just a blessing to be with both of you and explore these things. And yes, Riane, I look forward to exploring deeper collaboration and how we can apply your vast research and multicultural systems and whole systems understanding to this into our partnership mechanism. So that's a big embrace for going forward and exploring how we can best implement all the wonderful work you've already done, and certainly look forward to doing so. So, by linking arms and linking ideas and getting together and exploring what a true partnership really means will really be a very moving factor for the whole movement, for every movement, for all movements by whatever name, as long as they're going in the right direction towards higher frequency human consciousness of compassion, understanding, really driven by love, and knowing that we're all in this together. It is an interconnected, instantaneous reality of a consciousness field, and we're living through this momentary time where we see ourselves as physical entities, apparently, assumingly competing with each other for resources, but it's really this spiritually interconnected field of oneness, and we're all seeing that more and more all the time, and that will be the through story on all the religions and all the stories. We're all one, we're together, we're moving forward together, and we'll get there. Thank you for the opportunity to be together and be one with all of us here tonight. It's been a great pleasure.
Right. So a huge thank you to Riane Eisler and to Emmanuel Kuntzelman, and especially for the younger audience that's out there. You see the color of all of our hair. We've been in this game a long time, and we not only need you, but we need you to believe in the deepest dreams, the deepest hopes, and the deepest knowings that you have about this oneness and this wholeness that we're talking about, because you're the future and you can build this out to be the world that we'd all want to see. So again, gigantic thanks to Emmanuel Kuntzelman and to Riane Eisler.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Riane Eisler, and to our viewers. Each of the subsequent videos in this important video series will feature global thought leaders and activists discussing their work in the context of the Four Cornerstones with Dr. Eisler. And you can update yourself regularly on the series at the websites that will be posted just hereafter. And these include lightonlight.us, centerforpartnership.org, evolutionaryleaders.net, and the Sacred Stories channel at YouTube. That's YouTube at the Sacred Stories channel. Thank you for joining us, and please tell your colleagues about this important video series. This is Dr. Kurt Johnson of Light on Light Media and of the Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, a project of the Source of Synergy Foundation. And please also see our emerging work at holomovement.org. That's HOLO movement.org.